Hey, welcome into another edition of the Rice Football Preview Show. As always, JP Heath, voice of the Rice Owls, joining me today. I am Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor of the Roost, covering all things Rice football. And we march on just as promised. Rain or shine, we are here, JP. Isn't that right?
Yeah, you have to. When you do the post UAB shows, you have to do the post North Texas shows. As tough as that one was, I checked. The sun did come up. I know folks are probably tired of me saying that after different L's, but yeah, this too shall pass, as the great Dusty Baker said last night. And ready to talk a little Charlotte and one of my favorite road trips going to the Pines of North Carolina there.
Yeah, I know ranking Conference USA cities and destinations is probably not the focus of this show, but I will say, fun spot for Charlotte. Could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I like Charlotte, and most probably know I'm a small town guy, and I really like going to Hattiesburg, even Ruston. So I'm going to really miss those trips, not just for the quaintness and the coziness and the kind of juice from the small town, but boisterous crowd. But love going to Charlotte, and haven't gone there for football, basketball, and baseball. You get used to it and kind of making new, really good friends. But yeah, Charlotte, they're going to be a great conference foe, and always like going there. Reminds me a lot of my East Texas roots, and I like going. I like trees, Matthew. I like trees.
I like trees. As someone who is fiercely allergic to trees, I'm on the fence right now. I could give or take, but we will press on. Speaking of pressing on, we'll start. Knock on wood. We'll start with quarterback again, JP, because that is what we do here on the Rice Football Preview Show. We talk about the quarterback situation each and every week because Rice is going different quarterback than started their previous game. Oh shoot, I should have tallied this up. How many times this year has Rice a different quarterback than they started the previous game? I think we might be on top of the head napkin math 5 times in 9 games.
Well, you want to do a little live table talk? We could figure this out.
We changed after game 1 going into Houston.
Yeah, Luke started the Houston game after Wiley.
Right. We changed going after the Houston game, going into Texas Southern. That was Constantine. That was 2 changes.
Jake came late in the Texas game after Wiley got knocked out. Yeah.
And then we changed heading into the first game after the break, UTSA. No, that was Jake still. So we changed to Wiley for UAB.
Because Jake
that's 3.
Yeah, Wiley, and then now Jake again. So
and now Jake. That's 4. That's ridiculous. We've already said everything there is to say, but I just want to again reiterate that is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I don't know. Ridiculous to me has a negative connotation. It's what has been in front of them. They're not wanting to play, like I called on the broadcast. I'll man up to it. It's been a revolving door, and it's not what they want. But they have these last 4 games of the year, and maybe Jake can be that stabilizing force, and then Wiley can come back in spring ball, work better, and battle it out with Luke when we're going to USC. So, yeah, it's not ideal.
And when Jake and Wiley have been healthy, they've both played really well over the past month and a half of the season. So you're right. Maybe ridiculous. I am on the program. It's just I'm exasperated. I'm out of words. For someone who deals in words to be out of words, it's.
We'll blame that on the numbers side of you because you're a numbers guy too. But yeah,
that's true.
It's up there with one of the crazier stats, the 11 different starting quarterbacks since the start of 2017. Wiley had the most of those, but you play the hands that you're dealt. And like I said, maybe the consistency the last few games with Jake and then Luke for a spell at times, that's what it's going to be. And that's what it has to be at this point.
Yep. So we turn the page. We look ahead. I will say on Constantine, man, the rally he put together in the fourth quarter, what him and Jake Bailey did, I'm hard pressed to find a Rice quarterback wide receiver combination that have strung together that many consecutive, just big play after big play. I know we've had a couple good connections. Anybody throwing to Brad Rosner looks really good, so that's easy. But man, that was something special. And if anything, gets me kind of excited and looking forward to the offense that we're going to see this weekend coming against Charlotte. It's probably that connection starting there. And it's one of those things where, you know, you and me, JP, we'll sit down with the coaching staff and we'll do the preseason media days, and everybody, all the coaches and everybody will have their guys. They're like, just look for this guy. He's going to be a stud. Just you wait. And we hear this every year, and it's always, pick your different guy. But this year it was Jake Bailey, and everybody said he's the dude. He's going to be a dude. It was kind of a slowish start with everything else going on, but these past couple games, did you look up at the end of the game and just be completely nonplussed that he was at 140 receiving yards and 10 catches and a touchdown? I was just like, oh my, that was a lot.
Yeah, because he got a bulk of them on that last drive. And we do, obviously, the different quarter. We have Houston Methodist sponsors our stat board. And every time I go to a Houston Methodist leaderboard, most have heard that. And yeah, you know me too well. I looked up and saw Jake with the 140 post game. It's like, wow, okay. Because they just chipped away. It wasn't like outside of the amazing diving catch. It wasn't like he had an 80 or 90 yarder to pad that, like he was legitimately going over the middle, going outside, diving across the middle, diving down the sideline on that 4th and 10, went for 36, 37 yards. We saw some of that in the Southern Miss game where he had 83 yards. And that was, like we were just table talking earlier, that was a Constantine start, correct? Southern Miss. Yeah. That's so correct. You saw the connection kind of flourish there. I do want to see August Pete get involved a little more, because it seems like, again, this is just me observing. This is not me talking to anybody, trying to break any story. We're talking here. Okay. Got to preface that every few weeks or so, but it seemed like the connection with August and Wiley were there with August, 2 great games when Wiley was the quarterback. So I'm anxious to see, can Jake and August develop some of that? And we've seen Cedric Patterson really emerge. I had Mike Kershaw on the Mike Bloomgren show on Monday night, and we went into a lot of detail on that position group. And Patterson, man, my affinity for him. And 2 years coming back, he's a guy that has a lot of tools, that has been able to impress. And before we segue on into other things, I know this is a Captain Obvious statement, but just want to extend prayers for Wiley and just hope that it was one of those moments, Matthew. I don't mind admitting that I just stopped, and I really, it wasn't like I was going to start crying for him, but I think about it now, just knowing everything he's gone through and knowing what he went through to get that UAB win. I was like, man, I've got to get it together here. And I just hope that Wiley, I don't even have to hope that, because I know he's the type of guy with that fortitude and that faith to do that. But I just want to say how much the team, and you heard Coach say that to us yesterday, and then Coach said it Monday night on our show with him, how that really took some wind out of the sail, so to speak, of the team. So maybe having Jake for a full week, remember he didn't have a full week of practice last week, but having him for a full week, we saw what that full week of prep did after the Texas game. And he had those 2.5 weeks or so before he got injured at UTSA. But I wanted to get to that before we got rolling into some other things. I just pray for Wiley, and I know he'll be the better man for it. I just hate that it happened to him.
Yeah, it's absolutely awful, and you're right, we should follow up and say the latest that we've heard from Bloomgren. He mentioned on Tuesday, Wiley is in good spirits. He is recovering, and at this point is not expected to be available. I kind of figured, but Bloomgren confirmed not expected to be available for the rest of the season. I will echo kind of what you said. I share those emotions, and then it was pretty telling. Jake or JP, we just talked about all the Jakes. Too many J's. But after covering college football for so long, we've each seen our fair share of injuries, and the carts have come out a lot. I can probably count on a hand the number of times that an entire team has left the sideline to go out to the cart during the middle of a game. And that was kind of powerful seeing. I just looked down and the sideline was empty and everybody was out there for Wiley. So I know we talked a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, about how it was curious that a guy who was in a competition and might not be the starting quarterback was named a captain on this team. I think from what we've seen over the past 2 months, propelling why Wiley is a captain, and kind of fitting that his words from his hospital bed to the team were, go win these games so we can get to a bowl. Don't worry about me.
Yeah, and
that's just kind of who that kid is.
That's how he's made up. He's a different guy, and I just hope that he is back to compete with Luke and whoever the other quarterback candidates are in spring ball and leading up in summer practice.
Because I think is he technically a double redshirt sophomore with the COVID year?
Yeah, I actually asked him that after practice last Monday. And yeah, so he's the red. No, you know what he actually said? I'm rewinding it in my brain video. He actually said, I think so. So he's a fourth-year sophomore, at least on the roster. But then I think he's graduating. I mean, he can, this era of doing what you would like to do, he could do that. Selfishly, I would like him around here just to see that redemption story come full circle for a second time. But yeah, I think he's a fourth-year sophomore. You can trust the great Chuck Poole and company on the website. But Wiley still didn't know officially what he was. I thought that was fitting his personality.
And he's not the first guy that I've had that conversation with. How many years? How much longer are you here? The older guys are like, until they tell me I can't.
Yeah.
But while we're talking Rice offense, we will flip a little bit. We will talk Charlotte defense and kind of how they compare. I think it's interesting. This is a team that is middle of the road when it comes to defense against the run. They've done a decent job. It comes and goes at how they defended the run. But against the pass, they did just come off playing Western Kentucky. So Bailey Zappi has run a lot of decent to good defenses through the woodshed at this point. Mm-hmm. But Charlotte ranks dead last against the pass. So what is the Rice game plan kind of look like, and how do you, I guess, work around guys like, because Charlotte has some dudes. I look at Marquise Watts on the defensive line, Tyler Murray at linebacker. The front seven, they have some guys that can make things difficult. Is it as easy as we'll just throw it over the top of their heads and try not to deal with the guys up front?
Yeah, I think with the exception of Hawley, he's a redshirt freshman. There are a bunch of old men rotating in there at defensive line. And that was a big calling card with Brad Lambert when he was there. So I think some of those older guys were recruited in that big, bulky defensive line mindset. But yeah, I think this is a game. Again, we tie all this together with a full week of prep for Mike Collins. I went back a while there, didn't I? For Jake Constantine, a full week of prep. I don't know where that came from. But with Jake having a full week of prep, you can take advantage of some of those things that maybe were exposed by Bailey Zappi. Again, Zappi's going to expose things that other quarterbacks can't always do. But we saw Jake at other times. I mean, he can throw it over the top on you. We saw with Wiley the quick slants, doing some of those quick screens, supplementing it with the dump out pass. Jordan Myers had a great game. Career high 88 yards receiving. So I think that potential's there, but like we always say, don't look too much into the stats. These are all pretty good Division I college football players, and I think that Collins will have that opportunity. They've got their one Texas native on the two deep is Gio Howard. He's a Purdue transfer, went to Fort Bend Marshall. So he's a really good corner. And Robitaille, the safety, he's a third-year sophomore. And they've got Rogers, the strong safety. So They might not win like the awards postseason, but they're still very good college football players. And interested to see if Constantine could take advantage, like we've seen him in spurts this year. And we saw at the end of that game against North Texas, breaking plays off and making big plays when he has to.
Yeah, and you mentioned credit in the defense, and I feel like maybe there's a little bit of coach speak in that. I'm not going to call you out, but there is a little bit of truth as well. No, it's worth noting that this is a defense that was able to pull off against Duke. And they did it. There were some key offensive drives in the fourth quarter. I think they had to go down there, and Chris Reynolds led them on 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter to win the game. But the defense holding Duke Bay and letting that happen, I think, was particularly huge. And this is the kind of game you can kind of, go into a week and kind of expect, okay, here's what the other side of the ball wants to do. Charlotte wants to win this game, 20-14. They don't want to try and win a 45-35 shootout. That's not to say they don't have the horses to do. They put up plenty of points this season, but if they had their druthers, there's a good Texan word for you, druthers, or whatever nomenclature we're gonna go there. If they had their pick, that's what it would be. It would be a low-scoring game, which is something that I think Rice wouldn't be too unhappy about, but it's something to be careful of because they have a lot of guys that have made plays in moments and might not be the season-long heroes, but they have some talent. So it's going to be interesting there. And I think it's going to be interesting if we flip back a little bit to the Rice offense. We've already talked about the quarterback. Jake Constantine is going to be back there. We've seen kind of a 3-headed monster at running back. We know who the wide receivers are. One shift on the offensive line last week. Jovan Wolford, kind of nursing a knee injury, was in there for a couple short yardage goal line packages, but has given over Derek Ferraro at right tackle. So, we lament days of 5 consistent offensive line guys, but some positive results at that front last week, and you'd like to think that a guy's first start ever, he'd be a bit more refined, and the entire unit would be clicking a little bit better going into week 2. We've talked, and every week we talk about the running game and wanting to see that improved. I'm hoping having a game plan at quarterback around the quarterback that's going to play most of the game and more reps for the offensive line are 2 pieces that Rice can take forward into cleaning that up a little bit.
Yes. And the bounce back. Remember the bounce back games, the line after they were okay against Texas. That sounds weird. What are you talking about? 58-0. But schematically, they liked a lot of the things that they weren't totally blown off the ball against Texas. It was the Houston game where they had bounced back to play better against Texas. And the UTSA game, they bounced back and played obviously a lot better against UAB. And really, I dare say, dominated in the trenches. My words, not any of the coaches. But so how do they bounce back again? The issue is, my friend, you don't want to keep having those situations where we got to bounce back again. You want that consistency. A quick side note I did mention on the broadcast, but shout out to Derek Ferraro's dad, Dave. He owns his own business, and I talked to him before one of the games. They all blend together at this point. I think it was actually before the Texas game. And I got to meet him. I saw him a couple weeks ago against UAB, but they were ecstatic. They're cracking the 2 deep, but also now getting that start. I'm sure he's pretty elated. I hate that it had to come with Jovan going down, but they're developing that depth, and I want to see if we see Pepe in more situations outside of blocking, which he's the dancing bear, we call him. He's been amazing. And then if we see Ethan Onianwa in some other situations, because Coach Davis has told me in the past he could play guard or tackle. I think down the line he could even be a left tackle possibility. But yeah, there's a lot of young depth. You just hate that they keep getting having to bounce back in situations. You'd like them to have a good last 4-game stretch to end the season here.
Yeah, and Derek's a guy. Is he the senior is Wiley? Maybe he's one of those guys that hasn't cracked it 2 deep yet, but he's seemingly been around forever. He's had some injuries that have kind of pulled him aside. So I think it's interesting. And you know, you mentioned the bounce back. It's funny because I was thinking through this. I'm like, you know, if you averaged all the performances of the offense together and the defense together, maybe we get to a similar record, but you probably have a win over North Texas and a loss to UIB. So maybe the ups and downs, the volatility is not so bad. Maybe it's just bringing that floor up just ever so slightly so you can eke some of those out. I don't know. It's numbered. But other side of the ball, we do want to get there. The Rice defense matching up with the Charlotte offense. I guess the big question mark and what we don't really know right now is who's going to be at the helm of the Charlotte offense, because as with Rice, we've seen it's looks a little bit different when the starter is not under center or in the gun or whatever college teams are going with this these days. Have we heard anything official whether or not it's going to be Chris Reynolds or Texas A&M transfer James Foster?
Here's my fluency in depth chart language, Matthew. I speak English. Some would say not very well, but I do speak English. Hablo un poco español. Growing up in Texas, you know, I'm pretty fluent in Spanish. I also speak depth chart, you know. So when you have a depth chart that says so-and-so or so-and-so, I'd say 80% of the time that guy sets the second, or when it's a position as high profile like quarterback, the other guy is going to get the start. That would lend me to think, only with my depth chart speaking abilities, I've not heard officially from the Charlotte folks, but I think it would be Foster. But Reynolds, I don't know the severity of the injury that he suffered, but they listed him as an or starting. But he's their all-time leading passer. They haven't had a long history in the program, of course, but they're dramatically different with Foster out there than with Reynolds. For me personally, I want to beat their best guys. You know, for me, I want to call a game against the other team's best and get a win against the other team's best. So I don't know if it will be Reynolds, but Coach Bloomgren described it to me the other day like this. They're going to work it with some other backs, and they've got two balanced, pretty talented receivers in Dubose, Spencer too, but Tucker. Dubose essentially won them that Duke game. They had a really big coming out party. So it changes. They'll have to rely a lot more on the other weapons, though, if it's Foster. I know you know a lot more about Foster, but if Reynolds is a really, really good quarterback, their best quarterback in their short school history.
Yeah, he's an interesting story. You know, kind of a shorter guy, may not fit the profile of the scouts. This is what I want my quarterback to look like. But, you know, got a little bit of Wiley Green, just keeps showing up and just keeps winning the job and beating people out. Going into this year, there was a lot of uncertainty in Charlotte as to whether or not this would be Foster's job or Reynolds would be on. And not only is he hold on, I mean, he's played remarkably well. You mentioned short history. I feel like when you go and look at your depth charts notes, it feels like every other guy is like, well, he is top 3 all time in receiving yards. He is top 4 all time in tackles. And we're like, well, yeah, because 8 years, something like that. They're pretty new. But with that said, whether or not it's Foster or Reynolds, I think it's interesting. To the North Texas game, I think everybody had from the North Texas offense, DeAndre Torrey was kind of circled an exclamation mark that, like, we know this guy is going to touch the ball 25 times, like, period, the end. The Charlotte offense is going to be a little bit different. You mentioned Dubose and Tucker at wide receiver. They also have a couple of guys in the running game that have been featured at various points this year. So there's not really a go-to guy for the Rice defense to kind of shut down. And if you can close him down, you're okay. We saw them have their moments and ultimately, I think, struggle a little bit against Torrey. He had some big runs late in that game that kind of makes difficult for the Rice defense. So maybe it's a good thing that it's a spread and they can treat everybody equally, but it'll be interesting to see because I don't think anybody had circled a guy who was playing D2 football last time out. He was on the football field becoming one of the more intriguing playmakers in this offense. You mentioned Dubose' coming out party against Duke. How often do you see guys jump from D2 to the FBS level and just look like they didn't miss a beat?
Not much, and I'm a D2 guy. There was I can't even remember. It's rare. That's why, because you don't have that happen. A lot of times you have it the other way, of course, that go from D1 to D2 and flourish. But yeah, that's coming up from FCS and D2 to D1 and making that impact. And the Owls, I mean, their secondary has some stuff to prove. Their run defense has some things to prove. Rice has given up a lot of rushing touchdowns this season. They have to do a little better in the red zone while doing better in the red zone on the offensive side themselves. So don't think, even if it is Foster out there that at quarterback, that it would make a huge difference. And you're like, oh, licking your chops. I know I think of that sometimes as a fan watching my other teams play in different levels. So you can't have Dubose going for 7 and 210, and you can't let Foster and him develop that communication and confidence together if it's Foster or Reynolds. So you can't let them get those big plays early. I'm a huge believer in that first quarter, telling a huge story of the game, getting off to that better start offensively and defensively after the North Texas game.
Yeah, we've seen that time and time again. I think a big part of that for Rice is going to be paying attention to those guys that we mentioned. Like Shadrick Byrd, their running back, is interesting. We've seen college football in general, the impact of the transfer portal has been pretty interesting, and every school has kind of attacked it on a different level. Charlotte has a good amount of guys in their team that have come from elsewhere and are now kind of key cogs and fixtures. We mentioned Shadrick Byrd. I just mentioned Shadrick Byrd. We mentioned Dubose coming from Miles College, which I couldn't tell you where that was. But Shadrick Byrd coming over from Iowa and really being, we've seen time and time again, the Power 5 transfer comes in and they're supposed to be the star of the show. I feel like Byrd is one of the guys who has actually kind of lived up to the hype in some degree. Runs pretty powerful for a 5'10" guy and can make people miss, which is interesting.
Off the top of my head, Miles College is a small liberal arts college in Fairfield, Alabama.
Off the top of your head.
Yeah, and I looked it up just now. So.
Oh man, yeah. So that'll be interesting. I think we kind of hovered over the keys and what we want to see. Obviously, run the football, stop the run, time and time again. I think this is interesting. I think it's notable. Bloomgren mentioned during his media availability this week that these are two teams that are in the the top % of the nation in time of possession. They're going to both try and control the clock and be effective on, I guess, third or fourth down. This is my stat that I'm kind of clinging to for interesting sakes is Rice is now 9 for 9 on their last fourth down conversions. As a numbers guy, I'm just for all the chaos. Let's add another 4 or 5 to that this week.
Yeah, and it's insane because you track the way I do. Like they've jumped up to number 6 in the nation in fourth down conversions. And something I meant to ask Coach Bloomgren, I'll probably ask him pregame. Red zone's been better too. And really, almost if not more importantly, they're 9 for 9 on the last red zone opportunities. They had stalled out a bit, and they're starting to do a lot better where it really counts, and where it's really difficult for every team to score when that field shrinks. So 9 for 9 on their last fourth downs and 9 for 9 in scoring in their red zone opportunities. And they're getting 7s instead of 3s in there most of the time. So one other aside, I talked to Christian Van Sickle. He's going back home. I guess we're kind of wrapping this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me he used to sneak in or this was during the pandemic when they were taking classes online and whatnot. And he would get his reps in by going to Jerry Richardson Stadium. I picture this kind of finding like a little hole in the fence, just sneaking through, and then they would get in and use Richardson Stadium I'm sure they had some kind of permission there. Don't want to get him in trouble, but yeah, he's going back home.
Very Sandlotty.
He said he told me that, I'm trying to straighten this out. I don't have my notes right in front of me, but he's got a cousin is getting married that day. Otherwise, I mean, come on, fall weddings, folks. What are you thinking? But otherwise, he is going to have a lot of friends there, and he's going to have his mom and dad in attendance there, going back to his hometown. He went to Charlotte Christian, and where he kicked before at Elon College is an hour and a half to the northeast up the road near Greensboro. So thought that was a little fun fact and little fun nugget to throw in there.
Yeah, and I'll aside your aside, because we didn't really hit on special teams as we close out. I talked to Bloomgren about the couple of the missed field goals that Rice had last time out. He pointed to some snap and holding issues on that team, which of course you don't want to see, but mentioned that he didn't hold it on Van Sickle's struggles, he didn't attribute those to just some bad kicking days. Mentioned that Van Sickle in practice has been kicking great, and that the entire unit didn't execute as expected. So I don't know if that makes me feel any better or worse, but as someone who watches football, the snap is just supposed to be the snap. So hopefully that's something they can clean up, and we can see Van Sickle hit some field goals at home, because he's only at this point has attempted maybe less than 2 hands of field goals in his collegiate career. It's pretty short list. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that's all we have for next week. I'm beaming into the future. We'll be back next week. We'll talk Western Kentucky and Bailey Zappi, and I guess that they do have a rest of the team there, so the rest of the team too. We'll cover them. Same setup this week. We're gonna watch you creepily from the corner of your booth. Do you see? It's a live show, so you have no visibility of people looking.
No, thank goodness. I already apologize for people having to watch me. I do have that face for audio as it is, but no, on Al's YouTube and Facebook pages. And we have a pregame preview on the Twitter, but also on the Rice House Game Day app as well.
Yeah, and as always, you can find us over at theroost.com, patreon.com/@theroost. We got practice updates. It's been a busy week. We have injury updates, which I would like to be over with, but we're not. We got all sorts of things coming along, and then eventually, it's about to be basketball season. We'll get other sports run around here soon, so never a dull moment. Ain't that right, JP?
Tomorrow night, doing the broadcast,
hey.
Right? St. Edwards, yeah.
There we go. So go ahead, head out, get to some basketball games. Stay tuned. We'll get more football, but until then, thank you guys as always for joining us. Rice Fight
never dies.